Well, we'd like to welcome everyone this week to our AFI weekly update and Q&A. It's April 3rd, 2020, and we're going to be talking about what the CARE Act means, which is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. But for ease of purpose, we're going to call it the CARES Act. And also, we're going to talk about the effect of market volatility, given all of us have been impacted by the roller coaster of the stock market. And I'd like to welcome our guests. We have Brian Walker from the AFI Group. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Great to be here.
He is a financial advisor and president of the AFI Group. And we also have Edward Schuh. Edward, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Robert. I'm sheltering in place and had someone scan my forehead and no fever yet, so I feel like I'm doing all right.
That's good. That's good news. And Edward is a senior investment manager and managing partner of Inception Financial Services. We're grateful to have you both with us today. And we're going to jump right into talking about the CARES Act. And I'm going to go to you, Brian, if you could help us explain what can the community expect in the way of financial aid coming from the federal government as a result of the CARE Act?
Well, first and foremost, the government is trying to get money into the hands of those that are unemployed or have seen a cutback in their income. So what they are proposing and passed is a $1,200 credit per individual. For a married couple, that would be $2,400. And then for each qualifying child that's under 17, it would be an additional $500. So for a family of four, you could potentially see $3,400 check coming to you. And then there are some limitations. So for a married couple filing jointly, the credit starts to be phased out when your adjusted gross income exceeds $150,000. Then for a head of household, it's $112,500. And then for a single filer, $75,000 is the amount when it starts to phase out.
Okay, and we'll get into kind of what that looks like in the phasing out process. However, before we go there, I just wanted to ask really quickly, when can people expect to start receiving payments?
Well, we got word today that possibly as early as 2 weeks from now. It will all be determined on your 2019 taxes. For those of you that have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, then they'll look at your 2018 taxes. And it's kind of interesting, they will just deposit it into your bank account. So it should be pretty quick once the IRS has determined that you qualify for the check.
What if, for families who have not done direct deposit, they've always written a check and sent it in the mail, what does that mean for them?
Well, then the IRS will look at that and actually they will send you a check in the mail. So, so you have that information. And also the IRS, they have an online portal as well. So you can also provide your banking information and then they can do it electronically.
That is great advice and something I just learned that I may do as soon as we finish this call. So I appreciate that. But let's get into the when you exceed the limitations for financial aid, that looks like, if you could help us better understand.
Sure. So for a single filer, the income limitation is $75,000. So if your adjusted gross income for 2019 or 2018 was below $75,000, you get the full credit, the $1,200. But as your adjusted gross income starts to go above $75,000, then they will reduce your credit by $5 for every $100 in income you are above the $75,000. So if your adjusted gross income was $75,100, then your credit would be $1,195. Now, for a married couple with an income of $150,000 or less, they receive the full credit. Again, the payment is reduced by $5 for every $100 you make above $150,000. And then if you make $198,000 for the married couple, the adjusted gross income amount, then there is no payment at all. And then also, I think head of household, it's the same formula, $5 for every $100 that you are in excess of the $112,500. And if you earn up to $136,500, then you are phased out completely.
Okay. And how will income be calculated? There seems to be some question about that.
Well, again, the IRS will look at your 2019 tax return. And so they will look at the tax return and determine where you fall in those thresholds. If your 2019 tax return has not been filed yet, then they will look at your 2018 and determine those thresholds. So one side note, let's say for 2019, you qualify for the full benefit based off of your tax return. And in 2020, you make more than the $75,000 for a single filer. This is a gray area right now, but from what we've been told, the IRS is probably going to turn a blind eye and just allow that credit to stay there. Possibly they might adjust that on your 2020 taxes. So there's a little bit of a gray area there right now.
The magic term to remember is AGI, or adjusted gross income. So if you look on your tax return, you can look up what your adjusted gross income, that's generally what they're going to be basing it off of.
Right. And the calculation, so we'll have to clarify this week, but from both of your experience, you believe they'll base it on 2019 if it's filed, if not 2018, and then if we exceed adjusted gross income of those thresholds in 2020, that they may not come back and pull that money back.
That's my understanding right now. Is there's a bit of a gray area, so I don't think the IRS is really looking to pull the money back from individuals.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it would surprise me if they did, but you know, I mean, from my opinion, if you make enough for them to want to pull it back, that's kind of a good thing, considering we have so many people, you know, filing for unemployment, getting laid off temporarily, and you know, there's a lot going on. So it would surprise me if they did try to pull that back when we file our 2020. But you know, even if they decide to, I guess it's a good problem to have.
Right. And talking about taxes, are there any taxes applied to the stimulus, that financial assistance that people receive?
So as of now, no, these are basically tax credits. So they're coming to you tax free, and you're able to basically deduct it from your taxes when you file your taxes next year. So there shouldn't be any tax implication.
So before we move on to market volatility, I'm just going to ask you about any other benefits or information that you wanted to get out.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that's pretty nice. Well, I say that it's nice. It's nice for most of us because we get an extra 90 days from April 15th to July 15th to file both our federal and our state taxes. The people that I know that might not like it are all the CPAs out there who can usually breathe a sigh of relief the day after April 15th. But I think that they can understand kind of the purpose for this, to give all of us a chance to, some extra time to kind of get our affairs in orders with everything that's going on. But yeah, so we have an extra 90 days. And I think I touched on this in our other update as well, but for those Americans who are laid off, who do need to tap into some of their retirement resources, they made an allowance for us to tap into our retirement accounts, those that are tax deferred, without being penalized. So you can take out up to $100,000 without any penalty. The unfortunate part, we still have to pay the taxes on it. So it will come to us as ordinary taxable income. Now, within 401k plans, they've also made an allowance where normally the amount that you can borrow is $50,000, but they've extended that to $100,000. Now, I've had people ask the question, well, can I take a distribution from my 401k plan? And the answer to that is it depends. So within most 401k plans, you can't take a distribution until you either reach age 59 and a half, or if you're no longer employed at that employer. But what they're doing is employers are allowed to implement plan amendments that could afford people the opportunity to pull money out and take a distribution from their 401k. So the answer to that one is you need to get with your employer and ask if they're going to be implementing one of those amendments. Otherwise, the only way to really access it would be by taking loans. The other benefit that they're doing is for an additional 4 months, for those who are collecting unemployment, they're going to pay out an additional $600 per week. You may have read about this one in the news, because this is the part where some legislators didn't want to incentivize people not to work, because there are some Americans who that additional $600 per week will allow them to make more on unemployment than they do for their full wages. But they realized that the benefits were needed. We couldn't wait any longer to get this stimulus package out, so they pushed it out as the way that it is. The one other thing is the self-employed individuals can also apply. I also know that you have individuals that are 1099 that can apply as well. And you can apply on the EDD website that's listed. I believe, yeah, we got it listed down there, or there's a phone number to call. So, they're trying to make everything as accessible as possible for everyone, given all the circumstances that we're being subjected to.
But I can imagine that online you probably have a better chance than calling the 1-800 number, which we've attempted to do and been on hold for quite some time. So be courageous and try it online first if you can. You probably have some better luck. But let's move on to market volatility, and let's talk about, people are asking the question, should I stay where I'm at and ride this out so that I can participate in the recovery, or when do I get out of the market? When is the bottom going to happen? And there seems to be so much speculation about that.
Sure. And my answer to that question is, we have to ask ourselves what our loss tolerance is. How much are we willing to lose? We also have to ask ourselves, hey, how much time do I have before I'm going to need that money as well? And the examples that I like to use, and it's going to take a few, it's going to take kind of like a few different charts that I'm going to show you. And I've used some examples in the past, and I feel like I may have overcomplicated them. So I've tried to make this as simple as possible. So when we think of average return can be a very misleading number, because when you have negative numbers that are brought into the average, it can really impact our returns. So the example I want to use is, I'm going to use two examples where we average 0%. And I like easy math. So we're going to use $100. From that $100, we lose 10%. That leaves us with $90. Now from there, we gain back 10%, which a lot of people think puts us back to even. Unfortunately, 10% of 90 is just $9. Now, even though the average would be 0%, we're actually minus 1%, which is our true return. Now let's take it to the extent that we experienced in 2007, 8, 9, when we were down over 50%. So now from that $100, we take 50%. Now we're down to $50. We gain back 50% from there. We earn $25 off of that $50. Now we're at $75. The average is 0%, but we're still minus 25%. A lot of people don't realize how kind of misleading that can be when we use those mathematical averages to figure out what our average percentage is on our return.
And it seems impactful that the more you lose, the greater the loss, or the greater the return you need to get back to zero.
Sure. And you know what, Robert, it doesn't even matter the order in which we receive the returns, right? So using the exact same example for the 10%, if we gain that 10% in 1 year, we gain $10 on $100, that's 110. Now we lose 10%, we lose $11, we're still down 1%, even though the average is 0. And if you take a look at how much more impactful that is, with the 50%, it's exactly the same. We're still down that 25%. Gain 50%, we're up to 150. We lose 50%, we lose half of that, 75 down to 75. Now, why do I make such a big deal about this? The reason I make such a big deal about this is if we're not managing our risk appropriately, then we can get to a point where it becomes very difficult for us to recover, especially if we're taking money out along the way, if we're in retirement and we're relying on that money. So now what happens is if we implement some type of a risk management strategy where we have tolerances built in, right? Now the tolerance that we have built in, I implement a risk management strategy for a lot of my clients, especially nearing retirement or in retirement, to say, hey, we just don't want to lose more than X amount. And the reason being is the larger the loss, the greater the recovery has to be. It's exponential, in fact. So like if you were to lose that 10%, in order to get back to where you were and get into positive territory, you would need to make 11%. You follow the chart down, we lose 20%, you have to make 25%. The market was down at a max 30%. So if we lost 30%, we have to make 43%. And that's why it's important to ask the question, how much more are we willing to lose? Because if we lose an additional 20% and go down to that 50% mark, now we have to make 100%. We have to make 57% more than if we were to move to a conservative position now and start transitioning back into the market as the market settles and as volatility decreases and we start participating in some of that recovery. And the moral of this whole story is that by managing some of that risk, by managing some of that loss, I think the client that lost the most utilizing this risk management strategy was like 14%. So if you look on the chart down below, 14%, they only need to make 17%. We don't need to participate in the full 40, 50, or 60% recovery to get back to where we were and start making money. So I know that I implement a strategy called Beta Shield, which helps manage that risk. And I don't know, Robert, if you have the ability, maybe we can put that link out there for people to download a soft copy and just kind of read about what, how it operates. Because essentially, it's making system. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was saying because essentially what it involves is making systematic shifts from anywhere from moderate to aggressive positions to more conservative and then back. So we don't necessarily get all of the upside, but because we managed our losses, We don't need to.
Right. So can I ask you just to briefly explain, you mentioned Beta Shield, which is an automated system that helps protect people from large market losses. And it works both when the market's going down and as you're trying to time the market coming back. Can you explain how did that protect your clients during the rapid decline?
Sure. One thing that I'd like to just quickly clarify is talked about, one of the terms that you used was timing when to get back in. And I always hesitate, and I don't like to use the word timing or market timing, because when someone tries to time the market, there are 6 things that you have to be able to do. You have to know when to buy. You have to know how much to buy, right? And you have to know what to buy. On the converse side, you also have to know what to sell, when to sell, and how much of it to sell. So we're not really trying to time the market. We're trying to manage risk on our downside so that we don't have those catastrophic losses. And we basically take emotion out of it as well. And so it's based on volatility, and it's based on market movements in both positive and negative directions. So if you think about it, maybe a way to put it is whether we're going in the positive or negative direction, are we accelerating in that direction rapidly so that it becomes very volatile? I mean, we had over the last month and a half, if we've had instances where the market's down 4%, 7%, up 8%, down 7%. Those are rapid moves. So what we do is it automatically allows us to shift incrementally into more conservative positions such that we set our loss tolerance with a goal of not losing more than X amount. And that varies. We have very conservative strategies for this, and we have moderate to moderately aggressive strategies for this. So the moderately aggressive strategy is the one that realistically only lost about 14 or 15% when the markets are down 30%. And we've stayed in that position so far because we've still had extensive levels of volatility.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to help us better understand that. And of course, whether you're a client or not, if you would just love some advice or an assessment about how to mitigate loss and how to participate in recovery, feel free to reach out to Edward. But I want to finish the last question of our evening with Brian. Brian, what can be done with tax loss harvesting on losses this year and the opportunity to convert from tax deferred to tax free? How can that the future?
Yeah, I think I understood what you were asking. So this is a great opportunity, I would say, for a lot of people. We are in a very low tax rate environment, number one. And number two, some people have unfortunately incurred some big losses. And we have to remember, though, we've had about 11 years in a row of an up market. So, we are losing on some gains, but what that allows us to do is lock in some of those losses, which reduces our capital gains, which allows us to potentially shift more money from tax deferred into tax free. So now as we partake in a recovery, all of those earnings are going to be tax free. You'll never pay a dime of tax on those earnings for the rest of your life. And then later on down the road, when you decide you want to take money out of those accounts, those tax-free accounts, you pull the money out tax-free as well. So it's sort of a complex formula and system. You want to make sure you're working with an advisor and a CPA so you can get the right advice and plan right, plan properly, and execute properly as well.
Very well said. And we just want to let the community know, again, whether you're clients or not, we do have specialists that we consult with. We've put together a team of investment managers, financial advisors, estate planning attorneys, certified public accountants, all to make sure that we're getting accurate advice and helping our clients with consistent facts and providing accurate information. So if you need some advice or would like to consult with any of our specialists, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on the screen. And we're going to wrap it up for this week, and we will see you next Friday at the closing bell. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Robert.